Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You are about to see something that you have never seen before. The Ultimate Fighting Challenge.
This ring is something else.
In a battle where anything can happen, anything can happen, anything can happen, and probably will.
What up, everybody? So glad you're here. It's the J Shot with more old school UFC action in your ear. And eyes and face, I guess. The last event we covered was UFC 15, and since you know how to count, you're fully aware of what comes next.
Ultimate Japan.
UFC 16, it is not. UFC 15 and a half? Sure, call it that if you must. Mike Goldberg making his debut on the call tonight, which, being that it's December 21st, 1997, means it's the start of his tenure on the commentary desk, which would last for nearly the next 20 years. And what a fun and unpredictable 2 decades it was.
Mike Goldberg just ran through the back here with no shirt on. That was weird.
He shares a mic with commentary mainstay Jeff Blotnick as the two run down the night's card. 2 title fights are on deck as Ken Wayne Shamrock's little bro Frank will battle Kevin Jackson for the newly thought up middleweight belt, a weight class for those 200 pounds and under, I guess. And top dog Maurice Smith will look to dip, dodge, kick, punch, and dodge his way to retaining the heavyweight title against the natural Randy Couture, who is riding high after a very impressive win against Vitor Belfort just months ago. The Phenom, who'll also compete tonight, had been on a tear until Couture put together the perfect game plan to shut him down. But mathematician Goldberg sees it a bit differently.
100% adrenaline, 1000% pure gut. The question still remains, which Vitor Belfort will we see show up?
You lost one match to one of the best fighters in the world?
Go yourself.
Belfort will instead climb into the octagon with the ghetto man, Joe Charles, in a super fight of sorts, while the remainder of the card will see a heavyweight tournament with David Tank Abbott, Yoji Anjo, Conan Silvera, and the definitely more than 200-pounder Kazushi Sakuraba. But of course, what early UFC card would be complete without, well, you know.
On the card tonight in our alternate matchup,
UFC veteran Trey Trauma Telman and newcomer Bad Brad Kohler will square off for the right to step in should a fighter not be able to continue. As is the way it usually works with these types of fights, I'm sure this time will be no different. Although perhaps I shouldn't assume, as the laws of the octagon have grown substantially. Out with the no rules, in with the no biting, no fish hooking, no eye gouging, no headbutting, no hair pulling, no groin striking, no small joint manipulating, no striking of pressure points, no elbowing the back of any heads or necks, and no kicking of a man while he is down. In other words, there are rules. Okay, now that we know what they can't do, let's see what they can. Goldie starts off his commentary career with a bang, describing Telman as
sculpted wonderfully,
before providing some key details of the Octagon rookie's life.
Kohler trains 4 times a day. He eats 7 times a day.
Despite missing on a takedown and doing a Donkey Kong wind-up for a shot he doesn't throw, Kohler eventually brings the fight to the ground and controls a lot of the action without inflicting much damage. Medium Joe stands them up almost 5 minutes in, taking away Kohler's mount and forcing him to return to the feet, where he's severely outreached by his,
as Telman said, stumpy,
let's go with lankier opponent. The second half of the fight is virtually identical, including another stand-up and takedown. Meanwhile, you could hear a pin drop in the place.
Are you not entertained?
The Japanese crowd stays very quiet during the fight, but that is the culture here.
But right around the 10-minute mark, things start heating up in Yokohama Arena as Telman slides into an armbar from his back and gets the tap. Blotnick and Goldberg keep a lid on their excitement. When in Rome, I guess. Although if you told me they weren't even in Japan and were instead dubbing their commentary in from the US after the fact, not unlike an episode of Power Rangers, I'd certainly believe you. Next up, it's the Lawless One, and a guy whose name sounds like how 2 well-acquainted rap music enthusiasts might greet each other. Yoji Anjo.
Tank Abbott has been in 250 straight fights. His record probably around 245-5 with 240 knockouts.
Wow, how humble. Not claiming he's batting 1,000 in these mythical street fights that definitely happened. Tank and his hairless, leather-bound gang turned a few heads in old Japan, I'd imagine. But his entrance is pretty lames McPlains compared to Anjo Kazooie. Just look at that strut. A total showman. Really knows how to work a Japanese crowd into a frenzy. I know who I'm rooting for, and it is not the pit fighter. Unfortunately, the J-Shot curse is alive and well in the land of the rising sun. Tank makes good on a slam in mere seconds, and as if pummeling his opponent wasn't enough, he's also trying to push Anjo's head through the cage like he's T-1000.
At the press conference, Yoji Anjo said he would strike Abbott. He'll hit him hard. Tank Abbott said, uh-oh.
I have a feeling he was being a tad sarcastic, but I'm not exactly sure why he's so overconfident that he could take his opponent. I mean, this is Tank, who admits that he doesn't do many of the things most professional fighters do, like watch tape, exercise, eat healthy, or bathe regularly. Either way, when the horn sounds, it's Tank winning his first judge's decision. An obvious unanimous call, as at this point, Yoji looks more like Yogi Bear after sticking his head directly inside a beehive. Blotnick then downplays the unholy beatdown that was just handed out before we move to the other heavyweight semifinal.
And Abbott, having a stationary target, hit him several times.
I believe the technical term is battered the absolute shit out of him, but potato. Blotnick then tracks down the lawless one, who lets us in on a little secret.
Any injuries?
Yeah, I hurt my left hand at the beginning of the fight.
You hurt your hand?
Yeah.
Oh no. Does that mean what we think it means?
10 carries.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, though, as it's time for the other heavyweight tournament fight, which will see Marcus Conan Silvera test himself against the hometown hero Kazushi Sakuraba. Both are relative newcomers to the sport and are for the first time setting foot inside the octagon, which was nice enough to come to them.
The octagon is here in Japan, traveled on a ship for many days.
Now that Goldie has stalled long enough, we can get to the task at hand. Although, unfortunately, he still insists on talking through Sakuraba's banger of an entrance theme.
Recently just defeated Paul Herrera.
One of the many things he says during his walkout is that the 5'9" Sakuraba weighed in at 203 pounds.
You are lying.
Which would mean he's giving up more than 3 inches in height and nearly 40 pounds in weight. A bit of an uphill battle, which he tries to cut down to his size with a dreaded toe twister in the opening seconds. Phew, lucky for Conan, he didn't sink that in or it would have been all over but the crying. Silvera turns the tables, attempting to lock in a submission from his back before rising to his feet and slugging Sakuraba over and over until Big John steps in. But wait just a minute here. Kazushi says he wasn't out. He was merely dropping down and attacking Conan's mighty legs. Too bad, so sad, says McCarthy, though, who sticks to his guns.
Oh, he went out. This is a tough call for John McCarthy.
He raises the Brazilian's hand in victory as Sakuraba grows more and more pissed over the dishonor that has been brought to his family. Oh well, I guess that's the last we'll hear of that. Now I'm sure that, like me, you thought of Ken Wayne Shamrock as the UFC's Sylvester Stallone. So in that case, finding out he also has a brother named Frank who sorta looks like him is vindication for you and for me. They'll never doubt us again. Frank's hometown is listed as Sunnyvale, so you know he can go.
You fucking want one?
And he'll need to if he wants to become the first ever UFC middleweight champion, as his opponent is the UFC 14 lightweight tournament winner, Kevin Jackson. Yeah, I don't know either, but should be a good one.
8 years the elder is Kevin Jackson. The only thing different is the age.
Not bad, Goldie, but let's workshop that catchphrase just a little bit. I think you can do better.
Our first of two.
All right, sit back, crack a beer, time for a real barn burner.
Oh, and there's a submission on Jackson's elbow already.
What the H?
My Lord, what a quick fight.
In about the same amount of time you're given to shake off a concussion in Power Slap League, Frank finds himself an armbar and a spot in the UFC record books. They give him a pretty cool belt. He bows to the crowd, pumps the tires of his opponent, and presumably goes off to do what younger siblings do best: annoy their older brothers. Now, for the first time tonight, we'll see a fight between two men who both have octagon experience. Vitor, the Phenom Belfort, is back, and so is the ghetto man, Joe Charles. The big man has taken on some of the toughest in the sport, like Dan Severn and Oleg Taktarov, but at this point, his record was a not-so-stellar 5-8. Conversely, Belfort was near perfect at 4-1, and at only 20 years old, his stock was on the rise.
Belfort's back and seeking redemption.
ready to show that he is worthy of the acclaim he once commanded.
Man, they were ruthless back then.
It's Belfort's chance to return from the adversity of his loss in UFC 15, his first ever loss since he was just 9 years old.
I can't imagine there's footage of that, but I like to believe that maybe he bit off more than he could chew at a birthday party or something. Perhaps cut in line for cake and got clued in by one of the older kids. Bruce Buffer introduces the fighters just as a cameraman loses his footing while checking out a ring card girl's ass. The fight is a little out of the ordinary for Belfort, who seemingly wanted to prove a point. He opts to grapple, not throwing even one punch throughout, and trying his best to get a tap with several different submissions. Just about 4 minutes is all it takes for him to transition to a really nice armbar that ends the fight.
Were you just waiting for Charles to reach up before you stepped across? Yeah, was good.
You got that right, bucko. Okay, so remember back when Tank said he hurt his hand in his heavyweight semifinal match? Good thing they had that alternate bout, huh? Tank's bowing out, so Trey Telman will be getting the call, as is literally always the case, right?
Wrong.
It's decided instead that Sakuraba didn't actually lose, and that fight is ruled a no contest. They'll fight again, and whoever wins that is just the heavyweight tournament winner. Sure pays to be the hometown hero.
And making his UFC debut,
Buffer gaslights the crowd, and just like that, their earlier fight is erased from memory. Within a few seconds, it's deja vu all over again as the much bigger and stronger Silvera tries to overpower his smaller opponent. But Sakuraba has an ace up his sleeve, and that's that he's supposed to win. Some shadowy figures have obviously spent good money to make that happen, because around the 3.5 minute mark, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt just lets him take his arm and doesn't even bother to roll through and defend.
And the crowd here in Japan is on its feet. No controversy any longer.
You sure about that?
All right, one fight remains, and that's between heavyweight champ Maurice Smith and Randy Couture. The natural is rocking some long pants because you can't rip his trunks if he isn't wearing any, duh. And Goldberg tries out another not so catchy way to tell the audience the two men aren't so dissimilar.
Tail of the tape shows you one thing. Both these fighters are almost exactly the same size.
Say the line!
Mike Goldberg.
Virtually identical.
Obviously, their styles are quite a bit different, though. Smith getting through on a number of strikes early before Couture takes him to the ground and out of his element. While the natural is definitely in control of the action, Mr. Smith keeps attacking from the bottom and avoids several submission attempts. He holds his own, but there's no getting out as the Olympic-level wrestler is just too dominant from the top. And it doesn't hurt that he's getting plenty of pointers from his corner, which includes Dan Henderson. 15 minutes ticks away with little change. Now on to the overtime period, of which there are two for some reason. It serves little purpose other than to give the guy with striker stitched on the back of his shorts a chance to make it a stand-up fight. But as soon as he starts to cook, right back on his back he goes. Couture holds on through both OTs, landing knees to the top of Mo's head, but never getting close to a finish. When the buzzer sounds, I'd like to think it's obvious what the judge's decision will be, but with what we've seen so far, who knows?
So it's going to be a tough call.
Wait, it is?
one judge has it, a draw.
Nice of Cecil Peoples to make the trip.
Randy Couture!
So the natural walks away with the UFC heavyweight belt in just his 4th professional fight. Sound familiar? With his wrestling fundamentals, increasingly impressive arsenal of submissions, and the fact that he just doesn't seem to have a scared or intimidated bone in his body, Couture looks poised to go on a long run of defending his belt with no end in sight. Or not. Okay, friends, that was UFC 15.5 or 15.5 or UFC Japan or Ultimate Japan. Honestly, call it whatever you want. Just don't call it UFC 16 because that obviously would have made far too much sense. Time to say sayonara. So as always, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, check back soon for more, and I will see you next time. All the best.